Here's the brutal truth. The people with money, data, and real threat models are not betting their lives on cities, suburbs, or the grid. They're buying dirt, quietly, in cash, through legal smokescreens. And they're all moving toward the same kind of land like they got handed the same playbook. They didn't. They're just reading the same hard numbers, and those numbers are screaming. Between 2021 and 2025, more than 11,000 rural land deals lit up across 5 American states. Not local buyers, not folks moving back home, outsiders, people who never lived there, usually never even set foot there, and still they bought, cash, hidden behind entities built to keep their names off the radar. When you start pulling county deed records and stacking them against water reports, USDA ag data, FEMA maps, energy infrastructure, and old declassified nuclear target files, the pattern gets ugly fast. These purchases are not random. They cluster hard. Same regions, same county types, same logic. Listen to me. This is not about fantasy bunkers and Hollywood end-of-the-world garbage. This is about positioning. It's about where you can still drink, still grow food, still stay off the radar, and still hold ground when SHTF and everybody else is fighting over crumbs. Every property in this pattern passes the same 8 filters. Miss even one, and that land starts looking less like a refuge and more like a trap. First, water that does not depend on anybody else, not city water, not a pipe running 60 miles from some reservoir the state can't afford to maintain. I'm talking spring, well, aquifer, creek fed by snowmelt, water under your boots. That was the one non-negotiable. Every single buy, no exceptions. Second, soil that can actually feed you, not pretty land, useful land. Topsoil, decent growing season, right hardiness zone, land that grows calories, not just grass. Third, population density in the sweet spot. Too sparse, and you've got no functioning community. Too dense, and you've got competition, panic, looters, and resource fights. These properties sit in that narrow band where there are enough people to keep a volunteer fire department alive, but not enough to spark a food riot the second shelves go empty. Fourth, distance from nuclear targets. Forget the garbage you saw on TV. The maps are public. The people buying this land looked at them. They stayed well outside the consequence radius. Not close, not maybe, well outside. Fifth, low disaster frequency. Some counties get hammered over and over. Others barely get touched. Guess which one's got the money? Sixth, legal energy independence. This matters more than people think. In some places, going off-grid gets treated like a problem. In others, it's protected. That legal difference can decide whether your setup keeps running or gets buried in fines and red tape. Seventh, communities that already know how to function without outside help. Not people talking about self-reliance online. People already growing food, sharing tools, running their own fire departments, fixing what breaks. You cannot build that from scratch after WROL hits. Too late by then. And eighth, state-level respect for private property. Low taxes, clean water rights. No pattern of the state reaching for your land the second politics gets ugly. That one separates usable land from a liability dressed up as freedom. Now, let's talk Missouri, because this is the move almost nobody saw coming. Everybody expects Montana, Idaho, some billionaire hideout in the Rockies. But Missouri made the board for one simple reason. It's still within reach for normal people. In the Ozarks, especially Shannon, Texas, and Howell counties, land prices jumped hard over 5 years. But the real signal wasn't just price, it was speed. Parcels from 20 to 80 acres started moving twice as fast as the national average. Land that used to sit for months was getting locked up in days. And here's what makes Missouri different. Most buyers aren't even hiding. No maze of LLCs, no trust structure games. A lot of these are regular families from St. Louis, Kansas City, Chicago. They figured out they could grab 30 acres with a spring-fed creek for less than a city house down payment. That's not fantasy, that's math. The real asset in the Ozarks is water. Karst limestone, natural filtration, pressurized springs that have been pushing clean water up for ages. You're not just buying access to water, you're buying land that is the source. At a 200-day growing season in the South, valley soil that can produce real food, and old rural communities where mutual aid is muscle memory, not a slogan, and you've got a real bug-in option. But don't get stupid. Missouri has weaknesses. Whiteman Air Force Base keeps it tighter on nuclear margin than the top-tier states. And those narrow valleys can turn flash floods deadly in a hurry. Screw this up, buy the wrong parcel, and your fallback turns into a coffin. The ugly truth is, Missouri is the entry point, not the finish line. It works for families trying to get out of the blast radius of the suburbs without going broke, but the people with sharper threat models and deeper pockets are looking for wider margins. That brings us to West Virginia. And you need to pay attention here, because this one tells you what the people closest to federal power are doing when they stop talking and start positioning. Ask yourself a hard question. Why would someone working within an hour of Washington quietly buy 100 acres 3 hours west in the mountains, drill a well, throw up a solar array, harden a structure, and then call it a weekend place? Because they're not building a weekend place. They're building a fallback, a bug out that can become a permanent bug in fast. In Greenbrier, Pocahontas, and Pendleton counties, prices climbed hard. Out-of-state buyers flooded in. A growing chunk of those buys ran through Virginia and Delaware entities, the kind of paperwork shell game you expect in commercial real estate, not in a county where the local gas station might be the economic hub. That matters. When people with security clearances, government pensions, and careers built around risk assessment start clustering in the same terrain, that is not noise. That is a professional opinion expressed through land. Here's what tactical guys won't tell you. West Virginia's biggest strength is not scenery. It's not even isolation. It's redundancy. The Appalachian geology out there creates a decentralized water system, not one reservoir, not one big river everybody depends on. Thousands of independent springs pushing out of different fractures in the rock, feeding different hollows, different ridges, different valleys. That means no single point of failure. No one broken pump station, no one sabotaged line, no one bad policy decision that cuts the whole region dry. The mountain gave them distributed water for free. And then there's the privacy. Real privacy. Not suburban privacy where your fence gives you the illusion of distance while your neighbor hears every cough through the drywall. I mean ridgelines, folds in the terrain, dead ground, properties invisible from the road, hollows that swallow noise and line of sight. Cell service dropping off a couple miles from the highway isn't a downside in grid-down country. It's an OPSEC feature. Dead zones don't hurt you if you planned for them. They hurt the people trying to find you. But listen to me. West Virginia is not easy land. It's not beginner land. That same mountain terrain that gives you water and concealment also cuts your growing season down and limits flat, workable ground. At elevation, you can be staring at 130 days. You can feed a family there, sure, but only if you know what you're doing. Raised beds, root cellars, season extension, aggressive preserving. Appalachian-level gardening skills. This isn't throw some seeds in the dirt and hope. Screw this up, and winter collects the bill. The community factor cuts both ways, too. These mountain communities were built by people who learned a long time ago that nobody was coming to save them. That creates deep mutual support, but it also creates a hard shell. Outsiders are not folded in overnight. You don't just show up from the city with a truck full of freeze-dried food and expect trust. You earn your place. Slowly. By being useful. By keeping your mouth shut. By not acting like a tourist in someone else's hard country. That's why West Virginia is the insider's pick, not the flashy pick, not the influencer pick. The pick for people who know proximity to DC is both an advantage and a threat, and who want a position far enough to survive the shockwave but close enough to reach in a day if they absolutely have to. That's not random. That's a very specific calculation. Now, let's move to Tennessee, because this is where the strategy stops being about surviving the next bad year and starts becoming generational. Tennessee isn't just a place to hide, it's a place to lock land into the bloodline. On the Cumberland Plateau, in counties like Grundy, Van Buren, and Bledsoe, prices surged hard, and parcels from 50 to 200 acres started pulling bidding wars. In rural Tennessee, cash offers over asking. That's not normal market behavior, that's long-range planning. And the engine under that planning is one legal tool almost nobody talks about outside serious wealth circles. The Tennessee Dynasty Trust. Land can be placed into a structure that lasts up to 360 years. Read that again. 360 years. No probate, no estate tax grind, chewing the property down every generation. No slow generational bleed. Instead of the family land getting carved up and sold off, it compounds. The land stays intact. The position stays intact. The cash stays intact. That's not a real estate play. That's a lineage play. Listen to me. Most people think survival is about gear. It's not. Gear gets stolen. Gear breaks. Gear runs out. Position is what matters. And Tennessee is all about position over time. Not just for you, for your kids, for the bloodline after you're gone. That's why the money started flooding into the Cumberland Plateau. Grundy, Van Buren, Bledsoe. Parcels from 50 to 200 acres getting hit with multiple cash offers, bidding wars in places that used to be ignored. That is not hype. That is calculated movement. The Dynasty Trust is the legal engine, but the land still has to pass the real-world test, and Tennessee does. The growing season can run past 200 days. The soil can support a full spread of crops: beans, corn, squash, fruit trees, livestock feed. But here's the piece that matters more than dirt: the people. Eastern Tennessee still has living agricultural memory, not hobby farming, not social media homesteading. I'm talking families who can can food, save seed, manage livestock, rotate crops, and preserve meat, because that knowledge never died there. Grandparents handed it down, then their grandparents before them. That chain stayed intact. That matters because after grid down, after supply chain collapse, after stores are stripped and roads are jammed with panic traffic, you don't need theories. You need neighbors who already know how to keep calories moving from soil to table. You can buy good land in a lot of places. You cannot buy a community that remembers how to use it under pressure. Here's what the average suburban prepper misses. Tennessee's farm culture has also kept alive something even more valuable than canned goods: genetics, heritage seed banks, rare breed livestock, old crop lines bred for resilience, not shelf appearance. Animals that can forage, breed, and keep going without a pharmacy and a vet on speed dial. In a real SHTF scenario, when industrial agriculture hiccups or flatlines, those communities aren't just surviving. They become one of the only places in America still holding the raw biological tools to rebuild food production. Water isn't a problem either. Rainfall is strong. Rivers, creeks, springs, multiple watersheds. You're not hanging your life on one brittle system. The community structure runs deep too. Farming co-ops, volunteer networks, mutual aid that doesn't need outside permission, parallel systems already working behind the curtain. That's the kind of thing you can't improvise once WROL starts creeping in. Then there's the regulatory side. No state income tax, low property taxes, minimal codes. Once you get outside towns, strong property rights. That alone puts Tennessee ahead of a lot of prettier states that will regulate you into dependence. Add the Dynasty Trust on top, and the family buying 100 acres today may never have to buy that ground again for centuries. That's not just security, that's strategic depth. But don't romanticize it. Tennessee has pressure points. Oak Ridge is still in the picture, and while it's not an ICBM field, it is a nuclear-related facility with history and significance. Western Tennessee has tornado exposure that's no joke, though the Eastern Plateau buys you better odds, and population growth is closing the window, fast. The cheap, low-density, low-profile land doesn't stay cheap once the herd catches the scent. Delay too long, and you'll be paying premium prices for scraps. Now we get to Idaho, and this is where the mask comes off. Missouri is where families on a budget go. Tennessee is where people thinking in generations go. Idaho is where serious capital goes when it stops pretending. This is where the money gets cold, quiet, and operational. Outside the Boise corridor, prices jumped hard over 5 years. In Lemhi and Custer counties, out-of-state buyers stacked in at the highest rates in this whole pattern. And unlike Missouri, these buyers are hiding. Multi-layered structures, Wyoming holding companies, Nevada trusts, enough legal camouflage to make a ranch purchase look like a ghost transaction. That tells you exactly what they value: invisibility. Forget the garbage you saw on TV about rustic retreats. These are not vacation properties. Large parcels, 500 to 2,000 acres, moving at a pace that's choking county recording offices. These acquisitions are operational. The infrastructure being built on them goes way beyond what a normal ranch investment would require. And some of the buyers are the same tech executives who publicly preach dense cities, smart infrastructure, and urban future fantasies. Then privately, they go buy 1,000-acre ranches with airstrips in the Salmon River corridor. Here's the tactical lesson: trust checkbooks, not speeches. A man's public messaging is theater. His land purchases are confession. Idaho crushes the filter on remoteness and independence. Mountain snowpack, Snake River system, big water, sparse population. But the real strength is cultural. In most of America, off-grid living is a weird hobby. In rural Idaho, it's normal. The ranching culture didn't just tolerate self-sufficiency, it built around it. People there don't see independent water, backup heat, and off-grid power as exotic. They see it as common sense. That's a huge difference when supply chains break and desperate people start sniffing around. And there's one more edge Idaho has that most people never talk about: small-scale hydro. Mountain creeks with enough drop to generate steady power through micro-hydro systems. Not solar that depends on weather, not wind that comes and goes. Gravity. And gravity doesn't care about market crashes, cyber attacks, or fuel shortages. The ugly truth is, Idaho is not for amateurs. It's for people with money, discipline, and zero need for applause. But even Idaho has hard edges. The growing season in the high country can get brutally short, sometimes around 90 days. That means, if you want dependable plant production, you'd better know greenhouses, season extension, and how to squeeze calories out of a narrow weather window. Wildfire is the other tax. Dry summers. More fuel in the timber. More bad seasons stacking up. But here's the trade. No tornado belt. Cleaner threat picture. If you can harden for fire, the rest of the landscape gives you room most states can't. And that brings us to Montana. Number 1. Not because it's trendy. Not because it looks good in drone footage. Because when every kind of buyer runs the numbers, Montana keeps coming back as the answer. Tech billionaires, hedge fund people, remote professionals, former military, threat assessment types whose full resume would never be public, different backgrounds, same destination. That should tell you something. Western counties like Ravalli, Flathead, and Gallatin blew up first. Prices jumped hard. Then the second wave started pushing east into Fergus, Judith Basin, and Petroleum counties. Land that used to sit forever started moving in weeks. That's not random demand. That's wealth repositioning across a whole state. And the buyer profile is sharper than anywhere else. Family offices. Stacked LLC structures. Wyoming entity owns Montana entity owns the dirt. That's not about hiding from creditors. That's OPSEC. Pure and simple. Hide from public attention. Hide from journalists. Hide from desperate eyes. Then you've got the second wave that should make the hair stand up on your neck. Former military and intel professionals buying 80 to 300 acres based on terrain, concealment, water redundancy, and controlled access. They're not buying views. They're not buying pretty. They're buying choke points, elevation, and standoff distance. That means their threat model is not abstract. It's operational. Remember that word. Operational. Montana's ace card is water, glacial systems, snowpack, cold rivers, clean aquifers. In a country where whole regions are chained to fragile water systems that are already overpromised, Montana's water is not a bonus. It's the asset. Everything else rides on top of that. Agriculture is better than most people think, too. Sure, the growing season is shorter, but Montana gets long summer daylight, and that changes the equation. A short season with 16 hours of sun can produce more than people expect. Add in generations of ranching families who know root cellars, greenhouse chains, smoking, drying, fermentation, and real food preservation, and you've got a place that knows how to live past the grid. Now here's the part most people miss. Montana's emptiness is not just low population, it's logistics. In a real displacement event, panicked people move along roads and fuel range. Central Montana is so far, so open, and so demanding that for most of the country it's not just inconvenient to reach. It's prohibitive. That is a massive security advantage when looters, refugees, and desperation start rolling outward. Yes, Malmstrom is a real nuclear target. Yes, western forests can burn. But Montana is so huge that most of the state sits far enough away to keep those risks from becoming fatal flaws. That's why it ranks first. No hard ceiling. No deal breaker. Now listen to me. The land is only half the story. The ghost buyers matter because of how they buy. Wyoming companies with no public ownership trail. Second-layer LLCs in the target state. Agricultural exemptions slashing taxes. Conservation easements locking down development nearby while kicking back tax benefits. That is not casual investing. That is building a legal fortress around the property before the first fence post goes in, and the buyers break into 3 camps. Ultra-wealthy operators building full off-grid compounds. Upper-middle-class professionals running a city life and a 7-2-hour ready fallback at the same time. And the quiet migrants, teachers, nurses, engineers, accountants, the fastest-growing category. No shell games. Just ordinary people reading water reports, ag data, insurance retreat maps, population pressure, and deciding to move before the crowd figures it out. That's the convergence. Water systems failing. Food supply chains optimized to fragility. Insurance companies retreating from risk zones. Hard assets beating paper promises. No conspiracy needed, just arithmetic. So ask yourself the only questions that matter. Where does your water really come from? Could your ground feed you for a year? How many desperate people sit within driving distance? How far are you from a real target? Can you make power for 90 days? Are your neighbors assets or liabilities? And when your state gets stressed, does it loosen its grip or tighten it? If those answers hit you in the gut, good. That discomfort is data. The people buying this land already acted on it. The question is whether you will, or whether you'll still be thinking about it when the shelves are empty, the grid is down, and the mob finally turns its eyes your way.